Most people believe life changes through big breakthroughs, winning the lottery, getting a dream job, meeting a miracle mentor. But life rarely works that way. Sometimes, the entire direction of a person's life shifts because of something much smaller. Something so small you'd almost miss it. This is the story of a man named Evan, a man who didn't get a miracle. He didn't get lucky. He didn't get special treatment. He changed his entire life with 1%. And if you listen carefully, you may just realize you can do the same. Evan wasn't a bad person. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't stupid. He was just stuck. He lived a life many people live. A job he didn't like, a body he wasn't proud of, a routine that felt like a loop, a mind full of goals he never started. Every night he told himself the same lie. Tomorrow will be different. And every morning it wasn't. His home reflected his mind. Clothes on the floor, dirty dishes in the sink, half-written goals taped to the wall, notebooks full of plans, but empty of action. It wasn't one big failure that broke him. It was the silent accumulation of small ones. And then, one day, something tiny happened. He was late to work. Again. 10 minutes. Nothing dramatic. But when he walked in, his manager didn't shout. He didn't punish him. He simply said, "Evan, at some point, the way you live becomes who you are." Those words hit him harder than any insult ever could. He realized something. You become the result of the habits you repeat, not the goals you dream about. And that night, sitting alone at his kitchen table, staring at an untouched dinner, Evan quietly admitted to himself, "I can't live like this anymore." Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. That was the moment, the tiny, almost invisible moment, his transformation began. After that quiet moment at the kitchen table, Evan did what most people do when they finally decide to change their life. He went big. Too big. He bought a notebook with a bold title on the cover. New life, new me. He stayed up late making a perfect plan, a flawless morning routine, a strict diet, a reading plan, a workout schedule, a career goal list. Every page felt exciting. Every goal felt possible. Every intention felt pure. But intentions are fragile. The next morning, his alarm rang at 5:30 a.m. The world was still dark. His room was cold. His body felt heavy. And all the excitement from the previous night dissolved within seconds. He snoozed the alarm. Once, then twice, then for an entire hour. By the time he got out of bed, the perfect morning routine already died before sunrise. And that's when reality hit him. A punch he didn't expect. Motivation cannot be trusted. Motivation is like a sparkler, bright and exciting for a few seconds. And then it burns out, leaving only smoke. That night, scrolling half distracted on his phone, he came across a quote. "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." He stopped. Read it again. And this time, the words hit differently. He had spent his entire life setting goals, but he never built the systems to reach them. And in that realization, a quiet truth formed. Maybe the problem wasn't him. Maybe the problem was the way he tried to change. Evan sat on his bed staring at his abandoned notebook. The grand plans felt embarrassing now, not because they were wrong, but because they were unrealistic. And in that frustration, a simpler idea emerged. What if change didn't need to be big? He whispered it as if saying it too loudly would make it disappear. What if I tried to be just 1% better today? Not perfect, not transformed, not impressive, just 1% better. 1% is small. 1% is gentle. 1% doesn't scare you. 1% doesn't fight your old habits. It slides in quietly, almost unnoticed. So Evan began with the smallest thing he could think of. He cleaned his desk, not the room, not the house, and just the desk. A single surface. It took 6 minutes, but something shifted, not in the room, but in his mind. A tiny spark of control, a sense of direction, and a whisper of possibility. The next day he did something else tiny. He put on his shoes and walked around the block. No running, no timing, just movement. The day after he read for 5 minutes, then one day he wrote 1 sentence in a journal. Another day he drank 1 extra glass of water. None of it felt life-changing, but all of it felt possible. And possibility is the soil where new identities grow. As the days passed, Evan noticed something unusual. He wasn't forcing these small habits anymore. They were becoming part of him. One night, he opened his notebook, the same one filled with unrealistic plans, and wrote a single sentence across the page. "I am becoming better." He didn't write, "I want to be better." He didn't write, "I hope I become better." He wrote, "I am becoming better." And that small shift changed everything. Atomic Habits explains that true change begins with identity. You don't try to run it, you become the kind of person who moves. You don't try to read, you become the kind of person who learns. You don't try to clean, you become the kind of person who lives with clarity. Every tiny action Evan took was a vote. A vote for the person he wanted to become. And slowly, quietly, the votes were stacking. He was no longer fighting his old habits. He was outgrowing them. But even the strongest momentum hits friction. Weeks passed. Evan kept working on his 1% improvements, but he still didn't see any big change. His clothes fit the same, his job felt the same, his routines felt the same, and worst of all, his life still looked the same. He thought he was failing. He thought he was stuck, like he thought nothing was happening. But this was the part of the journey no one prepares you for. Progress is slowest right before the breakthrough. It's the place James Clear calls the Valley of Disappointment, where the effort rises but the results don't, where the habits are formed but the rewards are invisible, where the foundation is built but no one can see it. One night, frustrated, Evan almost gave up. He sat on his couch staring at the ceiling, wondering, how much longer can I do this? Then he remembered something he learned. Ice stays frozen at 31 degrees. It doesn't melt, it doesn't drip, it doesn't show progress. But 1 single degree more, just a tiny shift from 31 to 32, and everything changes. Water begins to flow, not because the effort increased, but because the temperature crossed the threshold. Evan realized he just hadn't hit his 32-degree moment yet. So he kept going. Slowly, signs began to appear. Small, almost invisible signs, but when you're paying attention, they matter. He woke up before his alarm one day, not because he forced himself, but because his routine had taken root. He walked longer without noticing the time. Not to burn calories, but because it felt natural. He reached for a book instead of his phone, not because he planned to, but because his identity leaned that way. These were micro breakthroughs, quiet confirmations that identity was compounding. One morning at work, a coworker looked at him closely and said, "You seem different. Lighter, more grounded." Evan didn't know how to explain it, because nothing big had happened. But everything small had happened. And the small things, when repeated long enough, stop being small. They become momentum. Then came the moment that completed the arc. His manager called him into the office, and the same manager who once told him, "The way you live becomes who you are." But this time, the tone was different. Warm, respectful, curious. He said, "I've watched you these past months. You show up on time. You finish projects early. You seem more focused, more disciplined, more reliable." Then he added something unexpected. "I want you to lead the new project." For a moment, Evan didn't react. Not because he was surprised, but because for the first time in years, he felt ready. This wasn't luck. This wasn't fate. This wasn't a sudden transformation. This was compound interest, applied to the human spirit. Months later, Evan sat at the same kitchen table where the journey began. But everything was different. His home was clean. His mind was calmer. His habits were automatic. His goals felt real. He realized something powerful. People overestimate what they can change in a week, and underestimate what they can transform in a year. He didn't become extraordinary because of one big moment. He became extraordinary because of 1,000 tiny ones. He didn't chase success, he built habits. He didn't chase motivation, he built systems. He didn't chase perfection. He pursued 1%. Every day, quietly, consistently. And in the end, that changed everything. If this story inspired you, drop a comment out. I'm starting my 1% today. And remember, small habits don't just add up, they compound.